Welcome to APA References, our second workshop in the Writing with APA series. This presentation is brought to you by the Academic Success Center. So what is APA? APA is the American Psychological Association. Sorry, this is going to be recorded, so I do ask you to keep yourselves muted and to switch off your video. Thank you. So this is our second workshop, and it is continuing our discussion on APA style based on the 7th edition. Last week, we spoke about in-text citations, and today we're going to talk about references. Our third and fourth workshop will talk about each of these different sections, as you can see on our slides. We'll talk about formatting next week, Thursday, and thereafter language and style. So, to remind everyone, in-text citations, right? That was in line with text. It's a shortened version of the source that the reader can use, and it allows for continued train of thought when reading. And you provide an in-text citation anytime you're taking information from another source. In comparison, a reference entry does not come in the text. It is a corresponding entry for that in-text citation, but it comes at the end of the paper. It is on a separate page at the end of your essay. It provides all the information that the reader might need to find that source, and it allows the reader to look it up for themselves. Every source that you use in your text will be cited in your reference, will be included in your reference list. So a quick summary. We learned last week that citing your sources is important because it allows you to give credit to other people's work. We also highlighted how an in-text citation provides the who and when to the reader while they are reading your work, and that when citing a direct quotation, you need to include a page or paragraph number in the in-text citation. So you provide the who, when, and where for any kind of quotation. And we also spoke about an online APA resource that's available to you as students, and that can really help you navigate some of the requirements for APA. And we're going to talk about that resource again today, so it will come up again. So if you missed last week's workshop, please remember that the recording is available on our website, so you can always go back and review that workshop. What are we going to talk about today? What's the agenda? We're going to talk about references in a list, how to build these references in 3 easy steps, and where you can go to find more information. So let's dive straight into the references list. What does that look like? So here we have an example, and in the little red square, you can see a list of reference entries listed alphabetically by the organization name or the author's last name. So we have American Psychological Association, Avramova, Balak, Berkman, Canada Lands Company. These are the different authors that we cited in text, and now we're providing a corresponding reference entry. The title of this page will be References. Again, it's on a separate page at the end of your paper. And only sources that were used in your in-text citations or in your paper will be referenced in this list. Entries are double-spaced, and you use a hanging indent. Do join us next week for our workshop on formatting. We'll go into more detail about what is double spacing and what is a hanging indent. So we'll answer those questions next week. Okay, so now that we've seen what references look like, how do we create them? So we have these 3 easy steps that you can follow to build a reference. Number 1, determine the type of source. In-text citations are the same for all types of sources. You use the author's last name and year. However, references are more complex. Each type of reference requires a slightly different format based on the type of source. Before starting to build a reference, you must first figure out what type of source of information you are referring to. Types of sources include things like journal articles, news articles, YouTube videos, podcasts, books, magazines, and so much more. Number 2, our second step. You want to find an example reference or reference template for that type of source. How do you know what information to include for a reference, and how do you know how to format that information? Later in this presentation, we'll go over a great website, APA Style Online, that provides some examples depending on the type of source. Okay, step number 3. We want you to then locate the information for the reference and input it into your reference entry. So once you know what you're looking for and how the reference should be formatted, you now need to then find the information and build the reference. So we are going to walk through these 3 steps in the next few slides. So what info do we need to include in a reference? Keep the following in mind. For a reference entry, we want to know the who, the when, the what, and the where. Who is responsible for this work? The authors. If there are no authors noted, you can use the name of the organization or the name of the source. The when. When was this work published? The date of publication? If there's no date provided, you can use N.D. which means no date in APA. What is the work called? The title of the web page, article, or book? That is the what. And then the where. Where can I retrieve this work? This is the location of the source, the URL, the name of the journal, the DOI, or the name of the publisher or book. And we're going to walk through these different elements, the who, the when, the what, and the where in 2 examples. We're going to start off with a web article example. So web articles are a common source of information. They are written by individuals or organization representatives and may or may not be a credible source of information. To assess whether a web article is credible, consider who is the author, what is the purpose of the website, what is the quality of the content. If you would like more information on how to identify credible sources, I highly recommend that you view the library's Source Evaluation Guide. It's a very helpful guide to identify and understand how you can assess a source for credibility. So now let's walk through an example of how to reference a web article. So we're going to be looking for those 4 elements: the who, the what, the when, the who, the when, the what, and the where. So let's begin with the who. Where can we find the who on this page? Well, what's indicating this to us is the by. So who wrote this web article? Well, when we see by, it indicates who's the author. So Marion Stenger exactly is the person responsible for this work. Great. We have the author. Now we want to know when. When was this published? Right? Just under the author, we have the date, December 17th, 2014. This is when the work was published. Now we want to know the title. How can we see the title? Well, it's a very prominent heading on the page, and it's bolded, and it's the first thing on the page. Why curiosity enhances learning. That is what this work is called. It's the title. And then lastly, we want to look for the where. Where can we find this? In APA, they call this the source element. So we're looking now for the source element. Well, if I look at this page, I can see the name of the website in orange, Edutopia, and I can also see the URL, right? The link that would take me to this web page in my search toolbar. So I have two elements for the source, or where can I find this? I can find it at this website, and I can find it based on this exact web link. Okay, so now we have those four elements. We have the who, the when, the what, and the where. Now, let's build it according to APA format for web article. So remember we said APA has a specific format depending on the type of source. So each of these elements come in a certain sequence or order. They organize depending on the type of source. So let's look at that. Over here in red, we start off with the author element. This is followed by the date element, then followed by the title, then followed by the source. So we have the last name of the author, Stenger, comma, M, which is the initial for the author's first name, and then followed by a period. That's the end of the author element. Next, we have the date element. Because we have more than just the year, we include that information. So we have parentheses 2014, comma, December 17, end of parentheses, and another period. This is then now followed by the title. Why curiosity enhances learning. Notice that this title is in what we call sentence case. Only the first word is capitalized. Everything thereafter is not capitalized, even though in the original web article, that title was capitalized. In our reference entry, we don't do that. Also notice that we have it in italics. It's that slanted type of font that indicates italics. So we have the title in sentence case and in italics. And then we follow the title with the where, the source element. So we put in, okay, you can find it at this website, Edutopia, and this URL. So we'll have the name of the website before the URL. And that is how we build a reference entry for a web article. Now, let's look at another example for a peer-reviewed journal article. So peer-reviewed articles, also called a scholarly or refereed article, are a key information source for college papers and projects. They are written by scholars for scholars and are a reliable source of information on a topic or field. These articles are published in journals, and these journals can be found in the library's online databases. You can often find these by using the library's OneSearch tool. So here's an example of where to find reference information for a journal article. So we're going to now walk through the exact same thing that we did with the web article, but now trying to find that information for a journal article. So what do we begin with? We begin with the who, the author element. Anyone want to guess where is the author element? Who are the authors of this article? Yeah, and this is quite different from the web article in that there are actually multiple authors for this journal article. Exactly. So it begins with the first author, Gail Pittham, but we actually have more than just one author. We have also James Elander, Joanne Lusher, Pauline Fox, and Nicola Payne. So Gail Pittham is the first author, but we have more than one author for this piece. So often in a journal article, the first author is the author that is perhaps did the most writing for the piece, is the one that's giving the most credit for the work that was produced. So there's a reason for the order of these authors, and we never want to change the order when we're putting it in our reference entry. We always want to replicate the order that is presented in the source. And that's true for any source, not just a journal article. Okay, great. So we've identified the authors, the who. Now let's look for the when, the dates. So this one's a little bit tricky. We have a published online, just under the authors, it says published online, 18th of March, 2009. And then if we go up to the actual name of the journal, Studies in Higher Education, volume 34, 2009, issue 2, we have the date element in two different places. I just want to also highlight that while in this instance, the published online and our journal publication dates are the same, the published online date can differ from actually the publication of this article date. So always try and use the article publication date versus a published online date, because sometimes an article can be published online before or after the article was published in the journal. So it might not be the exact date. That's just something to keep in mind. So okay, we've got the date, 2009. Now we're going to look for the title. Again, we have a very clear title. It's in bold, it stands out. Student beliefs and attitudes about authorial identity in academic writing. So we've got the what this is about. And now we're going to look for our last element, the where, the source element. Okay, so in a journal article, we have quite a few source elements to keep in mind. What are these? Well, we have the journal name. So where can this article be found? In what journal? Well, that's why we want to know the name of the journal. We also want to know the volume and any issue, so we can find the exact journal. And then we also want to know the page range, right? Where in this journal can we find this article? And in addition, instead of a URL, this journal article has a DOI. What is a DOI? It's a digital object identifier. This means that it is a stable link to the source of information. It's a little bit more, it's more of a permanent link than a URL. Okay, so quite a few elements that we would want to note in the source part of our reference entry. So now let's build this reference entry with all this information that we have. Again, what do we start off with? We start off with the author. So over here we have Pittham, comma, G, period, comma, Elander, comma, J, period, comma, Lusher, comma, J, period, comma, Fox, comma, P, period, comma, ampersand. Just before our last author, we put that symbol for and, Payne, comma, N, period. So what have we done here? We've put the last name of each author and any initial or initials that they might have. and we are including that in the author element. And we've kept the exact same order that we were presented in the original source for these authors. So APA has a lot of punctuation. That's why it's always great to use an example so that you can always just go and double check your punctuation. It's not something you need to know off by heart. Just go and double check an example and then review your punctuation that way. Okay, next after our author element is our date element. So what do we have? We have 2009. So we just include that in parentheses and then followed by a period again. And next we include our title. So again, we've put the title in sentence case. So only our first word for that title is capitalized, but the rest is just in normal case. It is not italicized in our journal article reference entry format, our title. Rather, the source element, the name of the journal, is italicized. Okay, so let's move on to the source. Here we've got Studies in Higher Education. That's the name of the journal. So this article, Student Beliefs and Attitudes about a Thorough Identity in Academic Writing, is found in the journal Studies in Higher Education. It's also found in the 34th volume of this journal and in issue number 2. Notice that the italics is for Studies in Higher Education, so the name of the journal, and the volume is also in italics, but not the issue. Really technical, little formatting differences and just little things to be aware of. Again, you can always go back to those examples and review your references once you've built them based on these little punctuation differences and formatting differences. Okay, so we've got the Studies in Higher Education, the journal name in italics, and in title case, we have each element or each word of the journal name in capitalization. It's capitalized. Studies in Higher Education. 34, that's the volume, and in parentheses we have the issue number 2, comma. Now we've got our page range 153 to 170, and then that's the end of that part of our source element. Next comes the DOI, and then that is the end of the reference entry. So we have the author, the date, the title, and the source elements. So now let's look and compare the two different reference entries from different sources. So we've got it highlighted in the different colors, the who, the when, the what, the where. And as you can see, for a web article versus a journal article, we still have the same sequence of information. So we will still include the who first, the when second, the what third, and the where last. However, what differences do you notice between these two reference entries? Feel free to share in chat. I'm going to just summarize some of the differences that I see. I see that there's different things italicized between a web article and a journal article. I also see that there's more source information provided for a journal article, and that there is more authors provided for this journal article. But again, a web article could have had more than one author as well. It was just in this example that we only had one author for the web article. So some key differences that you'll always see that will differ between a web and a journal article are what is italicized and the amount of information in your source element. Okay, so what would this look like in an actual references list? And here we have an example. These two entries would be ordered alphabetically, so Pittem would come before Stinger, and we would have it all in, we wouldn't have it color coded, right? It would all be in normal black colored font. And we have our hanging indent and no spaces between the two entries. So the hanging indent makes it visually easy for the reader to identify the source in your references list. Okay, so very quickly, where can we find more information? Before we quickly dive into that, I just want to mention about a citation or reference generator. Often we get asked, is it okay to use a citation or reference generator? Yes, you can. Remember, it is a tool. It's there to help you navigate and fulfill your assignment requirements. However, as a tool, it is just that. It is not always going to be entirely accurate. So sometimes a citation and reference generator will maybe get your reference entry 80% correct, but it'll have something that's off. So it's always good to double check your references generated by any kind of citation reference tool, generating tool. And so that's why it's also really important to have a basic understanding of how to create a reference entry or in-text citation so that you can know at least where the citation and reference generator is going wrong or is incorrect. So always double check your in-text citations and references that are generated by a citation and reference tool. It is often not 100% correct. Okay, so again, where can you go for further resources on APA style and referencing? Well, our APA style website's a great resource, and you can go to Style and Grammar Guidelines. Again, last week we spoke about the in-text citations, but just below that is the references menu. If you click on that, it will take you to this web page. There's so many different things that you can go and look at on this page, but I want to highlight the reference examples. So depending on the type of source that you're using, APA on their style website provides different examples based on your type of source, be it a journal article, a website, or a video YouTube reference. Here we have an example of a journal article, and then you could always use this again to double check, review how to build your reference entry. And what's also really helpful, it gives you a reminder of what an in-text citation would look like based on this example of a reference entry. Okay, again, if there is any missing reference information, you can go to the website. They provide this really helpful graphic that will give you more information on what to do when certain elements are not available to build that reference entry. So in summary, today we spoke about how references are listed alphabetically at the end of your assignment. We spoke about how to build a reference entry and how to focus on finding the who, the when, the what, and the where, and where to go for more information on APA. Thank you, everyone. That's the end of today's workshop. I'm going to stop the recording.